All right, and we're live. George, man, how are you doing? And how you holding up? How's it going in this COVID-19 time period for you?
Well, first of all, Walt, thank you so much for having me on. I greatly appreciate the opportunity to talk to you and engage this conversation. To be honest with you, it's been very challenging. Much like everyone else across the country and ultimately across the world. This is a period of pretty intense adaptation. There's a lot of change happening at the macro level, and a lot of things that are trickling down into aspects of our personal, professional, and family lives in ways that we just couldn't anticipate. So overall, I have to say I'm doing pretty good. My family's healthy, thankfully, and I've been a lot more in touch with my local community, so that's been a huge benefit.
Nice.
But obviously, still very concerned for how things are unfolding, and what things the future may bring as a result of this.
Yeah, yeah. So I guess before we get started, I just let's tell the audience a little bit about who you are, and your background, and what you do these days.
Sure. So I'm the executive director of the Puerto Rico Statehood Council, which is a 501c4 nonprofit organization that's dedicated to advancing the cause of equality for the U.S. citizens of Puerto Rico through statehood. And before joining the council in this capacity, I've worked for the last 15 years in a variety of different roles, both serving multiple governors of Puerto Rico in their engagement with Congress and the federal executive branch, as well as having served in the U.S. Congress as a staff member for the delegate from Puerto Rico. They're called resident commissioner, and also working in federal agencies and nonprofits.
Wow. So, I mean, you're working towards Puerto Rico and statehood. I mean, what does that even entail? What does that look like? I mean, maybe let's back up a little bit. What's the history a little bit of the United States and Puerto Rico? Kind of give us a crash course,
Sure.
over the last a couple decades until now.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, this is a topic that is not, unfortunately, taught in public education, so a lot of people are unfamiliar with it. The United States acquired Puerto Rico from Spain at the end of the Spanish-American War in 1898. So we've been part of the American family now for over 120 years. And in 1917, Congress made the people of Puerto Rico United States citizens. And as a result, we've served in every war since the First World War in very significant numbers. And the service that the U.S. citizens of Puerto Rico have provided has been awarded a Congressional Gold Medal in the case of the Buccaneers, which is a regiment that served in the Korean War. Puerto Rico has remained, however, unfortunately, a U.S. territory. And what that means is that we legally belong to, but are not a part of the United States. So what that causes is that Congress can actually treat Puerto Rico unequally under a number of federal laws, and it does so in a way that disadvantages Puerto Rico and limits our capacity to reach our full potential, not only for our own benefit, but for the benefit of all of the states with which we share commerce.
Well, so what do we, so what is, I mean, I guess kind of walk me through like your daily, weekly routine on this, on this topic. Like what are you working on? Who are you talking to? Like what are kind of next steps to sort of bring this together?
Yeah. So as part of my work in the Puerto Rico Statehood Council, the most important thing that we do is we engaged citizen advocates across the country. So not only in Puerto Rico, but we have, supporters throughout the entire United States and American citizens abroad, interestingly enough, that are wanting to know more information about how the current territory status harms Puerto Rico and how they can support statehood. So we analyze news, we provide information that's helpful for people to see all of the different ways in which the current territory, hurts U.S. citizens on the island. And then we provide, opportunities for them to advocate to their members of Congress and to elected officials for seeking a solution to this issue, which obviously is important to island residents, but it's also important to everyone in the states, because the reality is that Puerto Rico, being a territory, has meant that the economy has not developed in the same way as the economy has developed in the states. And that's led to a number of different results. One of them is outward migration, right? So we've had a huge amount of people move from the island to the states. And because we're United States citizens, this doesn't require any kind of immigration process. You literally just buy a ticket on JetBlue or any other airline, hop on a plane, and wherever you land, you can establish your residency, become a full voter and fully enfranchised participant in your local and federal government, and you have all the rights and benefits of any other U.S. citizen living there.
Well, so what is I listen, I know there's a lot of politics behind everything, but like, what's the holdup? Like, what's the pushback? Like, what's the, I mean, is it just half the other United States citizens being like, no, we don't, I don't know. I mean, like, what is the big roadblocks of, like, bringing Puerto Rico in? Like, what's, I mean, obviously I'm dumb and I'm not I'm not living your life and your daily conversations, but to me, it seems like, I mean, let's do this thing already.
Yeah.
Right.
So, I think that the biggest holdup is a lack of attention. And, Congress is a beast that operates based on a need to respond and crisis. It doesn't operate very well kind of looking out at longer term goals. And unfortunately, because Puerto Rico had been for such a long time a relatively stable form of unequal territory, that really allowed Congress to kind of be passive on the topic. However, that changed significantly in 2016. At that point, Puerto Rico experienced a very significant change because of a fiscal and debt crisis, and Congress was forced to respond. They passed a series of measures, including one that became law called PROMESA. It establishes a fiscal oversight board that essentially took over the locally elected government and reduced the amount of democratic accountability that local residents in Puerto Rico have over the decisions that are taken at the state level. The Supreme Court also issued some decisions that were very important and took away the notion that had been propagated earlier that Puerto Rico was somehow something other than a U.S. territory. And what that's meant is that, right now, and especially after the hurricanes that happened in 2017, hurricanes Maria and Irma, and then some earthquakes that happened earlier this year, Puerto Rico has gone from being in the congressional back burner to really being in the center spotlight in a lot of policy debates in Washington. So what we're trying to do at the Statehood Council now is utilize this opportunity where Congress is paying attention to Puerto Rico to highlight how achieving statehood would not only help to address a lot of the root causes of Puerto Rico's, economic and social problems, but would ultimately actually benefit America as a whole by making us a stronger country, and also, getting back to our core values of representative government, which is literally the foundation of our country's values.
Wow. So it's a lot.
Yeah.
So what, I mean, if the people living in Puerto Rico, are they advocates for being a state? Like, is it 50-50? Is it 90-10? Like, how many people
Sure.
are like, let's, like,
And that's a great question, which I think is really important for people to be aware of. So in Puerto Rico, because for the past 120 years, our ultimate political status has remained undetermined, the options for resolving that status have shaped our local politics, right? So instead of having a Democratic Party on the left and a Republican Party on the right, in Puerto Rico, you have had three traditional parties: pro-independence party, which has traditionally had the smallest share of the electorate, a party that supports the current territory status or improving that in some way, and then the party that supports statehood. So what has happened over the decades is that there's been a number of locally sponsored plebiscites, which are basically an election in which you choose between the different options. And in the past, some of those plebiscites had some pie in the sky options included in them, specifically proposals from the group that wants to improve the current territory, which basically invalidated the results. But in 2012, the government of Puerto Rico passed a law to establish a plebiscite, and a plebiscite was held, which asked voters two questions. The first one is, do you want to continue under the current territory status? And a clear majority of voters said no. And this was, over 50%. I think it was around 53%. And then the second question is, among the valid non-territorial options, which do you prefer? Independence with free association, which is a kind of treaty that it would have as an independent country with the United States, or statehood? And 63% chose statehood. So, since 2012, it's been clear that the U.S. citizens of Puerto Rico reject continuing under being under the current territory status and support statehood as the preferred alternative. And then in 2017, a second plebiscite was held with three options in it. One would be independence, the other one is continuing under the current territory, and then statehood. And statehood won an overwhelming majority, over 90% of voters in that one. So it's pretty clear that when faced with the choice, the U.S. citizens of Puerto Rico prefer statehood over anything else.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. I mean, it makes total sense. So I mean, how's the battle going for you? Like, are you winning? You feel good about where next steps, or is it still red tape and a cluster? I mean, are you feel like you're winning every 6 months or so, like, or is it just?
For me, I've been in this, working on this issue for over a decade now. So I'm taking a longer term perspective. And
Cool.
the reality is that the current circumstance right now is extremely challenging. Obviously, this is an issue that requires significant decisions to be made, and it needs attention from Congress and the federal executive. And right now, in the middle of this, COVID crisis and pandemic and the 2020 election year, the amount of attention available for addressing this is not very big. But What
Mm.
you really need to look at are some of the longer term indicators for how the movement has progressed. And what I see when I look at those is steady advancement towards increasing support for statehood, both among the national public, because polls have shown consistently that there's been kind of a trend of growing public support for statehood, as well as growing congressional support for statehood, where members have been more and more explicit about their support for statehood. Members have signed on as co-sponsors to a number of bills that support statehood. And what we're trying to do is to continue to grow that momentum so that when the time is ripe in Congress and when the right opportunity comes along for this issue to be addressed, that we can actually push it through and advance legislation that would admit Puerto Rico as the 51st state.
Yeah, I mean, how does it work for us, right? U.S. citizens, like I'm talking to you and I'm like, cool. I mean, it makes sense to me. I love Puerto Rico. I love going down there. I love the people. Come on in,
Yeah.
what is there voting for us? Do we have a say?
Yes.
Does that come up? And what is the pushback or not? Or are we 50-50? Are we 80-20?
Sure.
What does the United States people say?
So you definitely have a full say. In the U.S. Constitution, Congress is charged with the authority and the right to admit new states into the Union. So no state can be admitted without Congress passing a law and the president signing it to admit a new state. So the way in which the American public gets a say in this is through their elected members of Congress. And in terms of public opinion has now reached kind of a majority threshold. Over time, it's gone from the 20s to the 30s to the 40s, and now we've seen in the last few years more and more polls, national polls, come out from Rasmussen and other very well respected sources that show that there's a growing majority of public support for statehood. And obviously, there are people who are opposed to it for a number of different reasons, and that's completely normal. This is a democracy, but ultimately, what matters most is
what are they opposing? Like, what are you hearing most? Like when people are opposing, like what's the big things that pop up when people are opposing it?
Sure. So, there's a number of things that pop up. Most of them are related to really a lack of understanding of the current
Right.
relationship, right? So there's a lot of people that believe that, Puerto Rico would be a drag on America's economy if it became a state because United States would have to provide all of this additional federal funding, and Puerto Rico is a jurisdiction that is not as economically successful as many of the states, and they think that that would be a huge disaster. The problem with that line of argumentation is that it actually fails to recognize that the structure of the territory status itself actually limits Puerto Rico from reaching its full economic potential. Why? Because if we get unequal treatment under federal programs to support our infrastructure, then our infrastructure is underdeveloped, which means that we can't have enough as much economic activity. If we don't get the same level of support for our healthcare programs as federal government provides supports to other states and other jurisdictions in the country, then our workforce has less capacity to be fully healthy and productive, right? And the other thing is that as a territory, there's a huge amount of uncertainty that businesses that are looking to invest in Puerto Rico face, because of the fact that Puerto Rico as a territory could still technically become an independent country at some point. And federal government right now can change laws impacting Puerto Rico, and the U.S. citizens there don't have a vote with any vote in the Senate and only limited representation in the U.S. House. So policies can be changed in a way that impacts Puerto Rico that we don't really have a say over. And what that means is that Puerto Rico's capacity to ensure that the interests of its residents and the U.S. citizens that live there are fully taken into account when federal lawmakers pass their bills right now is pretty limited, and that has very significant economic impact. So ultimately, this argument about Puerto Rico, not being good as a state because it's an economic detractor, also really fails to recognize that almost every single territory of the United States that became a state experienced a period of economic growth that was benefited not only that jurisdiction, but ultimately all of the other states that it exchanges in interstate commerce with.
Yeah, that makes total sense. So listen, I mean, obviously you're very passionate about this. Tell me about you, man. What's your, give me kind of the background and where you grew up and
Sure.
Where did you have a lot of passion for this, obviously for good reasons, but tell me a little bit about yourself growing up and where you got some of this passion from.
No, definitely. Look, this has been a lifelong passion for me, in part because I was born and raised in Puerto Rico. I grew up there and lived there until I was 18 years of age. And my family is actually composed of Puerto Ricans, but also mainland Americans. So my grandfather on my dad's side actually came to Puerto Rico before World War II to help build out a military base on the island, and fell in love with my grandmother, and eventually deployed to World War II, survived the D-Day invasion in Normandy, and came back and married her. And part of the irony of this is that as a decorated veteran, combat veteran, who had to shed blood on behalf of his country and make all these sacrifices and had lifelong scars, because he wanted to live in Puerto Rico where his wife and her family were, he lost his right to vote for commander-in-chief and have voting representation in the federal government that made laws that he had to live under. So for me, that's very personal. And then, myself, I experienced the challenges of finding the same level of opportunity for myself in my academic and professional life, and had to leave Puerto Rico as a result of that. So I believe that most people in Puerto Rico, if they had the same opportunities as they have in the States and they had equal treatment and equal rights, they would, be happy to prosper on the island and do well there, and contribute to America's well-being from the island. But unfortunately, under the territory status, we won't ever have full equality. And that's why I think that we really have to advance this cause of statehood as a way to empower the citizens there to reach their full potential and make the best possible conditions for people to develop.
Wow. Yeah, man. That's a great story of your family. Jeez. Like, if you put it in that perspective, I don't know. I think everyone they don't make it personal. And you made a point about, people in the United States being more and more on board with this. Cause I just think, sometimes social media, everything just opens up, and you get to see the country as people, not just that's a territory, that's them, this is us. I think everyone gets very, I don't know, people just like to go into I'm team this, you're team that. So, I don't know. It gets weird until people can actually get out and have conversations, right? Go visit people, get to know everyone. And, like I said, I just think people get into their teams way too much. Their tribes, call it whatever. And, I'm tribe this, you're tribe that. So you stay in your tribe, I stay in mine. And I don't know, it's just weird to me. So I think discourse and travel will help break down, will keep breaking it down.
And what I find is exactly what you're saying. The vast majority of the time when I talk to, average people about this topic, and actually engage them with facts and information, but also talk to them about my lived experience, the vast majority of Americans that I encounter in the mainland, they're like, oh my God, that's terrible. How is this happening? How did I not know that we're literally holding, 3 million US citizens in essentially a second class citizenship status? A lot of the time, their response is one of empathy and understanding and outrage. Like, how was I not told about this? And what I'm trying to do is part of the Statehood Council is say, hey, take this energy, take this, feeling that you have, and let's channel it in a productive way. Let's tell our members of Congress that, we support statehood for Puerto Rico, that we want our fellow citizens to be full participants in the government that already makes the laws that they live under. That's the craziest part. People think, oh my God, we'd be changing America as a whole. No, we're already United States citizens. Federal law already applies to Puerto Rico. We can already, do a ton of commerce with the states, and we engage in that regularly. So what we're doing is actually bringing quality and balance to a relationship that is fundamentally unjust under its current structure.
Whew. Yeah, man. Jeez. Well, I mean, timeline wise, do you think, do you believe 5 years, three to 5 years from now, that this will happen? Or do you think, what's your timeline on making this come true?
Sure. So, I believe that there is a significant window of opportunity that it will occur in the next, 5 or 6 years. I think that a lot of people, particularly in Puerto Rico, that support this are desperate for statehood to happen right away. And what I think is really important right now is that we build alliances and support with people stateside that really can understand that, and then actually contact their members of Congress, which are ultimately the people who actually have the power to change this in federal law. So for me, I think that obviously, the pandemic has significantly changed the timeline for any kind of federal legislation that may be under consideration. But what's most important in the immediate term is that we continue building momentum and support so that hopefully once, the pandemic issues slow down and, probably we're past the 2020 election, that a new Congress with a fresh outlook, and whether it's the current incumbent in the White House or a new president, can take a fresh look at this topic and think about its importance to the revitalization of America's democracy. Because the reality is that if anything's been highlighted by this whole COVID pandemic, is that our current political system at the national level needs to be refreshed in a significant way so it's more responsive to the needs of average American citizens. And personally, I believe that adding Puerto Rico as a State of the Union would actually help to reinvigorate America's democratic institutions, most obviously by expanding, voter rights for current U.S. citizens that have been disenfranchised.
Mm. Yeah, that's great. How's Puerto Rico right now? I mean, I haven't heard much about COVID cases down there. I mean, I could be wrong. I mean, what's the situation down there? And if you know, currently what's happening during
Sure.
COVID in Puerto Rico?
Yeah. So Puerto Rico, like jurisdictions across the world, has been impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. Thankfully, the level of impact has not been as bad as many other places like New York or other major U.S. cities. The governor and her team have done a good effort, under challenging circumstances and implemented some pretty strict social distancing measures fairly early on, and that has yielded some pretty good results. So obviously there is a number of individuals that are infected, but it hasn't been as tough on Puerto Rico as it has been in other places. However, one of the ironies
Yeah.
is that when Congress has approved the recent, supplementary funding packages to address the ongoing coronavirus, pandemic, and to help states and municipalities deal with it, because Puerto Rico is a territory, we've actually been treated unequally under those federal laws. So less support is going to help meet the needs of U.S. citizens of Puerto Rico to address this pandemic than it is to states. And I think that that's absolutely ridiculous and short-sighted, because how is it that the lives of U.S. citizens in Puerto Rico are worth less than the lives of U.S. citizens in, Florida or New York or California or Oklahoma or Texas? I believe that as a country, we should make sure that we provide equal support to all our jurisdictions that are confronting this pandemic crisis.
Yeah, and it goes back to your point of people thinking that Puerto Rico is going to drag us down, but you see situations like this where you're like, all right, well, they're not getting the economic help that everyone else is getting, so they're not, they're never going to get to that point where they're as good as any other state. So it's this catch-22 and going to keep going round and round.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's one more thing which is actually really interesting, and it's that Puerto Rico is actually could be part of the solution to some of the challenges that America is facing right now, because Puerto Rico happens to have one of the top manufacturing industries in terms of pharmaceuticals and medical products that can actually help to support the over-reliance on global supply chains that America has found under these circumstances are creating a huge vulnerability to health security. So through statehood and equality, we could actually boost Puerto Rico's capacity to have, economics and political stability, increase manufacturing, and then have that domestic manufacturing be significantly more reliable, both in the current circumstance and in the future, when it comes to the need for pharmaceutical products and other medical products that are essential to combating a pandemic or dealing with any other kind of medical or health crisis.
Well, I mean, let's hope we can, get past this soon. Do you know if Puerto Rico's in lockdown like we are, right?
Yep.
And is there a time frame on reopening? Is it city by city down there? Is it, territory wide?
Sure. Yeah, the governor is developing and implementing a reopening strategy, much the same way that the governors here across the states are. I live in Virginia right now, and my sense is it's going to take a few more months before the
Yeah.
reopening happens, and it'll happen in phases. And Puerto Rico is basically planning to do the same kind of phased reopening, and also trying to follow the CDC guidelines for safe reopening. So, my sense is, it's going to take a little while before everything gets fully up and running. But one thing that I will say is, once things are, back online, there's probably going to be some great airfare prices to go do some vacations in Puerto Rico. So anyone
Do
who's
it.
going into that kind of summer break period, we'll probably be able to get some outstanding deals on hotels and other amenities on the island.
I love that. My wife and I used to go to Puerto Rico every year. I mean, kind of before we had kids. We were in the bar industry. We would just
Yep.
bartend and make some cash and have a few days off. And she'd look at me, I'd look at her, I'd be like, Puerto Rico? She goes, let's go. And we just whatever, spend 3 days down there, no agenda, eat some food and pool, beach, whatever we can. I love Puerto Rico, man. Unfortunately,
That's great.
once you have kids, it's just hard to pick up and go and travel and stuff
Sure.
like that. So I'm looking forward to it. So what else is going on with you, man? Like, what else do you have your hands in? What else are you passionate about? I mean, obviously you're working very hard on this. What other activities are you up to, and what other things are you working on?
Sure. So, right now I have a couple of projects that I'm developing. One of the things that I decided after I left, public service last year, is that I wanted to, start my own business, and I did,
Cool.
and I run my own business on top of the work that I do for the Puerto Rico Statehood Council. So I'm working with nonprofit clients and other entities to try to bring investment and resources to Puerto Rico, and particularly to support entrepreneurship, because I think that ultimately one of the things that's a key takeaway from this whole crisis that Puerto Rico has been living and that America's living now is that we need more people to take self-initiative to develop their own
Mm.
businesses, their own local solutions, their own community support structures. And whether you're developing a social impact business, or another type of business or nonprofit entity, I think that one of the things that is a really big opportunity is for us to think through, how we do have the power to make change in our own life, and that we don't have to exclusively rely on the government or someone else to solve things for us. So along those lines, and as part of my business and my personal efforts, I'm going to be launching a podcast, hopefully in the next month or two, and I'm really looking forward to helping people understand a little bit more about some of the root causes of the crazy change that's happening in our society, economically, politically, and then help them develop and gain ideas on things that as individuals you can do in your own life and as part of your community to take this opportunity to create change and move it in a positive direction.
Nice. So when do you plan on putting the podcast together or get it out?
So that's something that I'm literally going to be talking to my production team tomorrow, and I'm hoping
Cool.
that I get a better idea of the timeline. But I'm hoping it's in the next few weeks, and looking forward to be able to share that with you and your audience and the rest of the world.
Yeah. Yeah. And what's the name of so you started a business last year, you said?
Yes.
And what's the name of the business?
So the name of my business is Mersonia Group, and through Mersonia Group, I provide professional consulting services to
Mm.
nonprofits, to businesses, to
Yep.
various different entities, doing everything from analyzing federal policies to strategic partnership development, federal grant funding, opportunities identification, and obviously advocacy and support services. So those are some of the things that I do through the Mersonia Group.
Got it, man. You got your hands full. Like you're a little bit of everything.
Yeah, and on top of it, obviously, right now we're educating from home because I've got two little kids. So I'm working full
Mhm.
time, doing my business and doing the advocacy work for the Statehood Coalition. And I'm also, a kindergarten and pre-K teacher part-time. But obviously, I enjoy the fantastic support of my wife, who's just an amazing ally and someone who's doing really great work herself in the interior design and architecture field.
What do you mean a part-time kindergarten teacher? What you
Well, I
just
mean, the days that my wife is working, I'm
okay.
the one
Got it.
homeschool education. So, we put on the little videos from the teachers.
Yep.
We run through the exercise sheets and, all the different things that make sure
Gotcha.
that, even though she's not, my kids are not being able to go to school right now, that they're still continuing to
Yep.
advance in their, academic development, because obviously, that doesn't stop.
Yeah. So how old are your daughters? What are they, like 3 and 5 or 4 and 5 or?
Yeah, so my daughter's 6 and my son is 3. So they're at a great age, and
Yeah.
interestingly enough, I've actually found this to be a fantastic opportunity to share with them and get to know what their learning style is in more detail, and then also do a lot more outdoor things around our house and in our garden, and actually it's been in a lot of ways really really refreshing to spend a significantly larger amount of time with them, although I must say that obviously it's very challenging from a professional perspective, and maintaining that balance is something that I'm pretty sure almost everyone out there in the audience right now is going to be able to relate to if they're a parent.
Yeah, I'm hiding in my bedroom right now when my wife's but so I mean, it was rough for us in the beginning, man. It was just weeks of figuring out how to do it and how
Yep.
to, we've got a good system where I kind of get up and I make the breakfast with them and I get them started. My wife is breathing. She comes in over the top. And, in the beginning, we were trying to do like 8-hour school days. And then we're like,
Yeah.
this is like, so now
That's
we just,
crazy.
and I volunteered at my daughter's school before, and it's awesome to see, like, you, to your point, how they learn and stuff, and but it's not like they're doing work for 8 hours straight. So we
Yeah.
just get like 2 to 3 hours. We give them
Yep.
little minute breaks in between, and from like 9 to noon
Mm-hmm.
is like, let's just what did they give us the courses. But again, to your point, it's kind of like we do a lot of, with my work, a lot of like marketing decks and PowerPoints
Sure.
and stuff like that. And my one daughter's like, I've learned PowerPoints. And I'm like, you're 8 years old. And she's like, I love PowerPoints. I'm like, well, let's teach you PowerPoints. Like,
Sure. Yeah.
because now it's literally kind of turned into like a Montessori school around here. Now we're just like, okay, let's do the stuff that you're supposed to do from the school. But what else are you interested in? You want to like you want to edit my phone? Like, let's
Well,
learn that. Like,
it's hilarious that you say that because, I've had a very similar experience with my daughter. A couple of weekends ago, I was actually preparing to do a recording for my podcast, and I woke up super early because I'm like, the house is quiet. This is perfect time to do it. And then lo and behold, I heard the pitter patter of little feet walking, and my daughter shows up. And instead of being frustrated and disheartened that I'd lost my opportunity to get some, quiet time. I actually showed her the equipment, and she ended up asking me, Dad, can we record something? And we actually ended up recording a couple of mini episodes of a podcast, which I'm hoping to launch with her, and focus on things that parents and children can do during this time. So it's one of those things where this process also builds up the potential for creativity to be unleashed in ways that we just never expected before.
Yeah, and if you do it, if you do it correctly, I mean, a lot of people, like I said, we got frustrated in the beginning, and then my wife and I started arguing about stuff and just the dumb stuff,
the
but
normal stuff. Yeah.
You just embrace it. And you're like, all right, this is life. This is how it is. And like, I guess I've shot some videos, and to your point, my daughter's like, I want to be in the video. I'm like, let's do videos. Like, let's
exactly.
We're all here. We're all in the same house. It's like house / business / audio room.
Yeah.
So it's just like, let's just figure it out. Let's embrace it. And, although I'm like, my daughter, she's learning algebra in 3rd grade, and I pulled up one of the worksheets. I'm like, I look at my wife, she goes, don't look at me. She goes, I don't like
there
but
you go.
Again, it's kind of cool to like actually see what they're learning and how they learn, and their process. Like my youngest daughter is completely different than my oldest daughter, so it's, I don't know, it's a good time. We're trying to get through it and embrace it and be better people on the other side when we get out of here.
Most definitely. I'm sure that by the time all this is over, my kids will have been hearing me talk so much about Puerto Rico's statehood that they'll be outstanding advocates themselves.
That's awesome, dude. So listen, man, I appreciate your time today, and thank you for this. Just so people know, is there your website for your business,
Sure.
Instagram, and then if people need the help or they can write a congressman, like throw out all the information for everybody.
Sure, definitely. So for anyone who's interested, please go to www.pr51st.com. That's the main website for the Puerto Rico Statehood Council. We also have a page on Facebook and an account on Instagram and Twitter, PR51st. So you can get all the information about how to get involved with the statehood movement, contact your member of Congress, and you'll be able to get news and information about how to advance the cause of statehood. And then for me personally, my business is www.mersoniagroup.com. And there you can reach out to me individually if there's any need for consulting services regarding your business or your nonprofit organization.
Cool deal, man. Well, listen, go ahead.
Yeah. So, and I'm also on Twitter. I've got an account, LawsPR51, and you can follow me there as well.
Cool deal, brother. Well, thanks, man. I love what you're doing, man. It's always nice to talk to somebody that has so much passion for a good thing, a good cause. And like I said, I think people just get stuck in their ways. They get stuck in their tribes. They don't like change. And then someone like you that comes along and kind of democratize that and a big advocate for something that I think needs to happen. So it's cool. And I like talking to you. Thanks. I mean, you connected me to your wife. We had a good conversation about the hospitality industry. So,
excellent.
I love what you guys are doing and what your family stands for. And I wish you the best of luck with kindergarten teacher, business owner / PR advocate / it's cool.
Yeah.
You're a true entrepreneur, man.
No, well, I greatly appreciate, the work that you're doing through this podcast and, the offering me the opportunity to speak to your audience and continue getting the message out there. If there's any way that I can be helpful in the future, please let me know.
Cool deal. All right, brother. Thanks a lot. That's it, everybody. We'll see you next time.